You know what's funny? We often think that to make someone miss us, we have to do more texting, more posting, more proving, but the truth, the more you chase, the less they feel your absence. Especially when you're dealing with someone avoidant, someone who runs the second they feel emotionally cornered. If you really want your avoidant ex to start missing you instantly, the secret isn't to pull them closer, it's to let go in a way that makes them feel your absence as peace, not punishment. Here's what that means. Avoidant people crave space because they associate closeness with losing freedom. So when you stop trying to change them, stop analyzing what went wrong, and stop sending those just checking in texts, you suddenly become something rare. You become safe. You become the person who no longer threatens their sense of control. And that shift, that silence, speaks louder than any message you could ever send. The real power comes when you redirect your energy from wanting them back to getting yourself back. You start living, posting, laughing, connecting not for show, but because you're actually rebuilding your emotional rhythm. When you do that, your ex will feel something they haven't felt in a long time: curiosity. Because now, the person who once felt desperate to hold on has become the one who's finally free, and freedom is magnetic. You see, people miss what they can't easily access. They remember what made them feel safe, not what made them feel chased. So the moment you stop chasing, your absence becomes presence. Your silence becomes a statement. And that statement says, I loved you, but I love myself enough not to wait for you. And that's when they start missing you, not because you tricked them, but because you reminded them of your value by actually living it. So don't send another text trying to be understood. Don't post something to get a reaction. Instead, focus on becoming so centered, so peaceful, and so focused on your own life that your energy says, I'm no longer waiting for you to see me, I already see myself. Space creates attraction, not pursuit. When someone you love starts to withdraw, your natural instinct is to close the gap, to text, to call, to explain, to fix. You want to show them how much you care, thinking that if they just understood your intentions, everything would fall back into place. But in reality, that energy of pursuit often drives them even further away. It doesn't matter how pure your heart is. When you chase someone who needs space, they don't see your love, they feel your pressure. What's happening is psychological, not personal. When someone avoids intimacy, they equate closeness with loss of control. They need to feel autonomy to feel safe. So every time you try to bridge the distance, they subconsciously feel suffocated, and the more they pull away, the more desperate you become. It's an exhausting cycle that leaves you drained and unseen. But here's where everything changes the moment you stop chasing. When you give space instead of pursuing, something powerful happens. You disrupt the pattern. The avoidant person suddenly feels the quiet. They no longer feel the need to defend their independence because you're no longer threatening it. They're not running anymore because there's nothing to run from. Your absence becomes the very space where they can start to feel again, and for the first time, maybe even start to miss you. You see, attraction grows in the unknown. It thrives in mystery, curiosity, and the subtle tension between wanting and having. When you remove the constant reassurance, the other person begins to feel the contrast of your presence and absence. They remember your warmth, your laughter, your energy, not because you're reminding them, but because now they have the mental space to recall it. Giving space isn't about manipulation or pretending you don't care. It's about understanding that true connection can't be forced. It's about realizing that your job isn't to convince someone to value you, but to create enough distance for them to see what they stand to lose. The silence you create isn't rejection, it's respect. It says, I know what I bring to the table, and I'm not going to beg anyone to sit with me. That kind of quiet confidence is magnetic. It shifts the dynamic from need to choice. And when people feel they have a choice, they start to choose based on desire, not obligation. So instead of asking, how can I make them miss me? Ask, How can I make my energy so peaceful that they feel its absence? Because when you stop chasing, you start attracting. You become the calm in their chaos, the peace they didn't realize they needed. And when your presence starts to feel like freedom instead of pressure, that's when their heart begins to drift back toward you, not out of guilt, not out of habit, but because the space reminded them of your true worth. Your calm is more powerful than your contact. When emotions run high after a breakup, especially with someone avoidant, your instinct is to reach out and fix things. You think that one heartfelt message, one late night call, or one deep conversation might make them see your side, understand your pain, and come back. But what you don't realize is that in those moments of chaos, your emotional turbulence only amplifies their desire to run. Avoidant people withdraw because they equate emotional intensity with danger. They don't know how to handle closeness that feels consuming, so they escape into silence, distraction, or distance. The more you react, the more they retreat. The cycle feeds itself. Your anxiety fuels their avoidance, and their avoidance fuels your anxiety. But imagine this: instead of reacting, you pause, you take a deep breath, you don't text, you don't post something dramatic. You don't send paragraphs explaining what they're losing. You simply stay calm, genuinely calm. That stillness isn't weakness, it's strength. It communicates a message that no amount of words could ever deliver. It says, I am not falling apart without you. I am centered. I am whole. That quiet energy carries weight because it's unexpected. Most people respond to rejection with panic or emotional chaos, but when you respond with poise, you stand out. You instantly become the calm after their storm. And for someone avoidant who lives in constant fear of emotional suffocation, your calm is irresistible. It's not about pretending you're okay or suppressing how you feel. It's about learning to hold your emotions without letting them spill everywhere. When you stay grounded, you regain control over your energy. You stop being reactive and you start being magnetic. The person who once ran from your intensity begins to notice something different: your peace. They start to wonder how you moved on so effortlessly, how you seem lighter, more at ease. That curiosity plants a seed in their mind, and that's where missing you begins. Because calmness creates contrast, and contrast creates awareness. Every time you choose calm over chaos, you're telling the world and yourself that you no longer need someone else to validate your worth. That shift in energy is powerful. It breaks the invisible attachment cord that kept you emotionally dependent. It's like saying, I can love you deeply and still be okay without you. And when your ex senses that truth, their walls begin to crack. They start to feel safe again, not because you're chasing them, but because your energy no longer threatens them. You've transformed from the person who overwhelmed them to the person who represents peace, and peace is what people crave when life feels heavy. So stop trying to make contact your power move. Let your calm do the talking. When your silence carries serenity instead of sadness, when your absence feels like a breath of fresh air instead of a storm, that's when they begin to miss you, not out of guilt, but because your calm reminded them of the kind of love that feels safe to return to. Reclaim your energy and redirect it. After a breakup, it's easy to let your mind revolve entirely around the other person, what they're thinking, whether they miss you, who they might be seeing, what you could have done differently. Your emotions start orbiting around their absence like your life has lost its center. But the truth is, they were never meant to be your center. When you give all your energy to missing someone, you leave no space for your own healing, growth, or joy. The most magnetic thing you can do, especially when dealing with an avoidant ex, is to stop pouring your attention into them and start pouring it back into yourself. Because when your energy shifts inward, everything about you begins to change. Think of your energy like light. When it's focused on chasing or longing, it scatters. It's dim, unfocused, and unstable. But when you turn it inward, when you start investing that energy into your goals, your appearance, your passions, your friendships, your peace, that same light becomes powerful and radiant. You start to glow differently, not because you're pretending to move on, but because you're actually rediscovering who you were before the relationship blurred your edges. That's what makes you attractive again, not manipulation, but genuine self-alignment. Avoidant people are often drawn to independence. Ironically, they crave connection but fear losing themselves in it. So when they see you no longer chasing, when they see you thriving without their validation, it disrupts the image they had of you. Suddenly, you're not the person waiting by the phone or trying to prove your worth. You're out living, laughing, and growing not to make them jealous, but because you've remembered that your life has always been bigger than them. That realization creates curiosity. They start to wonder what changed, why you're so calm, and who you're becoming. The moment they notice your energy no longer points toward them, they start to feel the absence of your attention, and attention, especially from someone who loved them deeply, is something they eventually crave back. But here's the key: this redirection has to be authentic. You can't fake peace, energy doesn't lie. If you're pretending to be happy just to get a reaction, they'll sense it. Real change happens when you genuinely commit to yourself again. You start working out not to get revenge, but to feel strong. You start spending time with friends not to distract yourself, but to feel connection. You start exploring new hobbies not to fill a void, but to expand who you are. That's the energy of someone reclaiming their power, and power in its quiet form is deeply attractive. When you redirect your energy toward your growth, you no longer wait for them to give you closure, you create it yourself. You stop asking, "When will they miss me?" and start asking, "What kind of life do I want to build now?" And the beautiful irony is, when you genuinely focus on building that life, that's exactly when they begin to notice the difference, because nothing pulls an avoidant ex closer than the sight of you no longer needing them to feel whole. Silence is a message of self-respect. After a breakup, silence often feels unbearable. You want to reach out, explain, apologize, or remind them of what you shared. You convince yourself that if you could just say the right words, they would understand, and maybe things could go back to how they were. But silence isn't emptiness, it's communication. It's the loudest statement you can make without uttering a single word. It says, "I value my peace more than your confusion." It's a form of self-respect that doesn't need validation. When you go silent, not out of anger but from acceptance, you shift the balance of energy entirely. You're no longer reacting, you're responding with maturity and control. For someone who is avoidant, your silence is disarming. They're used to being pursued, to having their distance questioned or challenged. Your calm withdrawal breaks the predictable pattern. It makes them curious, unsettled even, because silence does something words can't. It gives them space to feel. It allows the absence of your presence to sink in. While you're silent, they no longer hear your voice, your laughter, your reassurances, and in that quiet, the memory of you grows louder. They begin to feel what it's like not to have access to your energy anymore. That's when missing you begins to take root, not through manipulation, but through the natural contrast between what was once constant and what is now gone. But silence isn't about playing games, it's about reclaiming your dignity. It's choosing to step back when talking would only drain your power. It's realizing that peace is more persuasive than pleading. You don't owe anyone constant access to your emotions, especially someone who didn't value them when they had them. When you remain silent, you're sending a signal not of bitterness, but of boundaries. You're saying, "I care, but I also care about myself." That energy carries strength because it shows you're not afraid of loss. You've accepted that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away gracefully. This kind of silence doesn't come from pretending not to care. It comes from finally understanding that you can't convince someone to see your worth, they have to feel it in your absence. When you stop chasing closure, you become the closure. You stop explaining yourself and start embodying self-respect. You become the person who can love deeply yet still choose distance when love becomes one-sided. And that balance, that quiet strength is deeply magnetic. People often confuse silence with weakness, but in truth, it's emotional intelligence, it's power under control, it's knowing when speaking would only lower your energy and when walking away restores it. When you hold that kind of power, you no longer need to prove anything. You've already said everything by saying nothing, and in that quiet, you reclaim your voice not through sound, but through presence. That's the moment when your silence turns from emptiness into impact, and your absence begins to speak louder than your words ever could. The magic happens when you detach with love. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring, it means you stop clinging. It's the moment you choose to love someone without needing them to love you back the same way. You stop trying to control outcomes or force reconnection. Instead, you release them with grace, not bitterness. You let go because you understand that holding on too tightly to something that resists you only causes more pain. When you detach with love, you're not pretending you never cared, you're simply acknowledging that love can exist even in absence. It's choosing peace over attachment, growth over obsession, and acceptance over control. When you truly let go, your energy shifts. You stop vibrating at the frequency of neediness and start radiating self-worth. The person who once drained your emotions no longer defines your emotional state. You begin to feel lighter because you're no longer waiting for their text, their validation, or their return to feel whole again. That freedom creates a different kind of attraction, one that isn't rooted in desperation, but in calm assurance. Avoidant people, in particular, sense this shift deeply. When they feel you've detached without resentment, it removes the emotional tension they once feared. Your energy becomes soft, open, and warm, not chasing, not cold, just peaceful. That peace draws them in because it represents something safe, something mature, something real. Detachment doesn't mean you stop loving. It means you start loving in a way that doesn't hurt. You can still remember the good times, wish them well, and feel gratitude for what you shared without needing to relive it. It's emotional evolution. You move from "I need you to be okay" to "I'm okay whether you stay or go." That's the kind of emotional maturity that not only heals your heart, but also makes others look at you differently. They sense your strength, your balance, your quiet self-assurance. You become someone who isn't ruled by fear or loneliness, but guided by inner peace. And here's the beautiful irony: when you detach with love, that's usually when the person you wanted starts to feel your absence the most, because love without control is rare. Most people hold on out of fear of losing. But when you let go lovingly, you stand out. You leave a memory that feels warm, not heavy. You become the one who didn't beg, didn't guilt trip, didn't punish, you simply released with kindness. That kind of ending lingers. It makes people reflect, not react. It makes them realize what they lost, not because you forced them to, but because your grace revealed your worth. To detach with love is to accept what is, without trying to rewrite it. It's the quiet confidence that says, "I loved you, and I still wish you the best, but I also choose myself now." It's powerful, not passive. It's strong, not heartless. And in that balance between care and clarity, you don't just make them miss you, you find yourself again. Because the real magic was never in getting them back. It was in remembering that love, when held without attachment, becomes freedom, and freedom is always unforgettable. In the end, love isn't about chasing, convincing, or proving. It's about becoming the kind of person whose peace, confidence, and self-respect speak louder than any words ever could. When you choose silence over desperation, calm over chaos, and self-worth over waiting, you don't just make an avoidant ex miss you, you remind yourself of the strength that was always yours. So keep growing, keep shining, and trust that the right connections will always recognize your value when you no longer try to prove it. Thank you for listening, for showing up for yourself, and for having the courage to turn your pain into power.